The message from the stars arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Most of Earth was still drinking coffee, still scrolling on their phones, still wrapped in the daily rhythm of life when it happened. At exactly 9:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, every screen on the planet flickered. Television broadcasts froze mid-sentence. Radio hosts fell silent. Internet connections choked, and cell towers went dead. Something else, something impossible, had cut through the noise of human civilization to speak directly to every one of us. The voice that followed was not like any voice humanity had ever heard. It was beautiful, almost musical, carrying the cadence of ocean waves layered with chords of haunting sound. Yet beneath the beauty was something else, something that made hearts race and stomachs clench. A weight. A presence. The sense that whoever spoke had power, and with that power came authority. And then it spoke, in perfect English. People of Earth, the voice intoned. Then Mandarin. Then Spanish. Then Hindi. Then Arabic. It rolled effortlessly through every language humanity had ever spoken, as if the speaker had studied us for centuries, dissecting our civilizations, our cultures, our words. And though the words were polite, their meaning carried a quiet and unmistakable threat. We are the Zephyrian Council of the Greater Galactic Order. Your world has been observed. Your species has been evaluated. You have 37 standard cycles to prepare for integration into our collective. We offer you the choice we have given 17 other worlds before yours. Join us willingly, and prosper under our guidance, or resist, and face the consequences of your stubbornness. The voice faded, but the silence it left was heavier than any thunder. In Washington, Admiral Jake Morrison had been reviewing deployment schedules for the Pacific Fleet when the transmission struck. One moment he was staring at logistics on a glowing screen, the next every terminal in the Pentagon displayed the same alien script, burning itself into memory. Morrison had spent 43 years in the Navy. He had commanded destroyers in stormy seas and aircraft carriers during geopolitical crises. He had watched humanity stare down wars of ideology and resources. But nothing, had prepared him for the possibility that alien beings would arrive not with ships in the sky, but with a simple ultimatum. Surrender, or face annihilation. Within hours, President Harrison called an emergency meeting. In the Situation Room, the most powerful men and women on Earth gathered, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and a small group of scientists who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Their faces told the same story: awe, fear, and the creeping realization that humanity's future had just been rewritten. The President broke the silence. 37 standard cycles, he said, voice steady. Our best estimate is that means 37 Earth days. Just over a month to decide whether we bow to creatures we've never seen, or fight them. The room stayed silent, but Admiral Morrison felt the same fire rising in his chest that he saw reflected in others. Humanity had never backed down from a fight. Why should the rules change simply because the enemy came from the stars? But a simple question lingered in the air like smoke: could Earth even win? That was when Dr. Paul Bennett cleared his throat. He was head of the Advanced Research Projects Division, a man whose files carried classifications that even Morrison had never seen. Admiral Morrison, Bennett said, his tone almost reluctant. What I'm about to reveal has been hidden above top-secret clearance for 8 years. We've been preparing for this possibility since the day we first detected signals from deep space. The project was called Devastator. The word hung in the air. Bennett explained that far from Earth's surface, in hidden shipyards scattered through the asteroid belt, something unprecedented had been under construction. Humanity's response to an event just like this. The UES Devastator. A warship stretching 15 miles from bow to stern, its armor forged from reinforced alloys, its heart powered by an antimatter core that pushed the limits of physics. It was not just another ship. It was a statement. A vessel designed to be humanity's answer if the stars ever came knocking with demands. The Devastator carried weapons that had no counterpart anywhere in human space. Among them, a primary system so radical that even its creators whispered about its dangers, a weapon based on quantum displacement, capable of tearing holes in the fabric of space itself. Bennett's words filled the room like fire. The Devastator was not a ship meant for defense. It was a planet killer, a war bringer, a machine of last resort built to tell the galaxy one thing with brutal clarity: humanity would not kneel. "It's 96% complete," Bennett said finally. "With everything pushed to the limit, we can have it operational in 34 days. The president leaned back, eyes heavy with the weight of billions of lives. Then he turned to Admiral Morrison. "Admiral, I'm giving you command of the Devastator. If we choose to resist, if we choose war, you will be the one to lead it. What's your assessment?" Morrison rose, every instinct of his long career converging into this single moment. "Mr. President," he said, steady and sure, "I've read every book on military history ever written. And I know one thing: when someone gives you an ultimatum, they're not here to negotiate. The Zephyrians conquered 17 other worlds. They expect us to surrender, because that's what everyone else did. But they've never faced humans before. They don't know that we'd rather die fighting than live on our knees." He let the silence that followed carry his conviction. "Let's give them a response they'll never forget." The president nodded, decision hardening in his eyes. Then it settled. "Dr. Bennett, 34 days. Admiral Morrison, 34 days to prepare humanity's first interstellar war." That night, Morrison left the White House and looked up at the stars. The ultimatum echoed in his mind. Somewhere out there, the Zephyrians were watching, certain of their victory. Certain that Earth would fold like every world before it. But in 34 days, the Devastator would rise. Humanity's answer would not come in words. It would not come in treaties or ambassadors. It would come in fire. And the galaxy would learn what it meant when Earth was given an ultimatum. And so the countdown began, 34 days until humanity's first interstellar war. The question was no longer whether Earth would resist, but whether resistance could truly succeed. What do you think? If humanity faced such an ultimatum tomorrow, surrender or be destroyed, would we have the courage to fight back, even against impossible odds? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you're enjoying this journey into speculative, human-centered science fiction, make sure to subscribe, because in the next part, the Devastator will awaken, and humanity will make its choice heard among the stars. The days that followed the ultimatum were unlike any other in human history. For the first time, every headline in every country carried the same story. Every news feed, every conversation at dinner tables, every whispered word in the quiet of the night revolved around the same truth: humanity was no longer alone. Some responded with awe. Religious leaders declared the event as proof of prophecy, angels or demons from the heavens, depending on which verse they turned to. Scientists filled the airwaves, dissecting the transmission, analyzing every linguistic nuance, every sonic frequency, searching for meaning in the precision of the alien message. But beneath it all was fear. Would Earth surrender? Would humanity fight? And if it fought, could it possibly survive? Admiral Morrison had no time for speculation. His life narrowed into a countdown, 34 days. Every hour carried the weight of civilization itself. He left Earth within a day of his appointment, traveling not to some grand space station the world had seen on news broadcasts, but to the hidden shipyards buried deep within the asteroid belt, facilities kept secret even from most governments. There, behind walls of ice and rock, the future of humanity was taking shape. The Devastator. No image, no file, no leaked photograph could prepare Morrison for the reality. As his shuttle emerged from the asteroid's shadow, the ship filled his vision, a titan of steel and alloy suspended in the void. 15 miles from bow to stern. More a floating continent than a vessel. Its hull bristled with rail cannons the size of skyscrapers. Fusion batteries pulsed with latent energy. Shield generators shimmered faintly, bending light around them as if reality itself bent to the ship's will. And at its heart, buried deep within layers of armor, the antimatter core glowed with the fury of a captured star. It was not graceful. It was not elegant. But it was awe-inspiring. Humanity had poured every ounce of its genius, its stubbornness, and its will to survive into this single creation. The Devastator was not simply a battleship. It was a declaration. And now it was his to command. The ship was not finished, but it was close. Morrison walked the unfinished decks with engineers, technicians, and officers working 20-hour shifts. Sparks flew from welders. Cables lay coiled across the floor. The smell of ozone filled the air. Dr. Bennett joined him on the command bridge, its massive windows opening to a panorama of stars. "We'll be ready in 34 days, Bennett said with the confidence of someone who had devoted his life to the impossible. Morrison nodded, though his thoughts were already elsewhere. A ship this massive required a crew unlike any before. Thousands of officers, engineers, scientists, soldiers, pilots. Humanity's best and brightest had been handpicked, sworn to secrecy, and flown in from every corner of the earth. Americans, Russians, Chinese, Indians, Nigerians, Brazilians, national lines blurred here, irrelevant before the enormity of the task. For the first time, humanity was truly united. Not under the United Nations. Not under a single flag. But under the threat of extinction. Morrison looked at the men and women training in the simulators, running combat drills in the hangars, and testing weapons with eyes hardened by determination. He felt something rare stirring in his chest, not just duty, but hope. They would not go quietly. But hope was not enough. Each night, Morrison lay in his quarters and studied the reports. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 other worlds. 17 civilizations older, richer, and possibly more advanced than Earth. None had survived. None had resisted long enough to leave a warning. What made humanity different? Was stubbornness enough? Could one ship, no matter how massive, no matter how powerful, stand against an empire that ruled the stars? He wrestled with the questions, alone in the silence of the asteroid base. But in the end, he returned always to the same conclusion: surrender was not survival. It was erasure. To kneel would mean the end of humanity as it had always been, curious, restless, and free. And so he pushed his doubts aside. Command was not about certainty. It was about conviction. On the 17th day, the Devastator's antimatter engines roared to life for the first time. The asteroid base shook as the ship's thrusters lit the void with searing light, propelling the 15-mile Titan slowly into space. The crew cheered, some openly crying. For the first time, the Devastator was alive. Weapon tests followed. Rail cannons hurled tungsten slugs at near-light speeds, shattering targets into dust. Plasma batteries ignited practice drones in bursts of fire. And then, reluctantly, Dr. Bennett authorized a single test of the ship's most dangerous weapon, the quantum displacement cannon. A sphere of unstable light gathered at the weapon's core, reality trembling as if unsure whether to hold together. Then the beam fired, silent in the void. Space itself seemed to ripple, a jagged tear opening for a fraction of a second. The target, a moon-sized rock drifting millions of miles away, simply vanished. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Gone. The crew stood in stunned silence. Even Morrison, hardened by decades of war, felt a chill crawl down his spine. "We built this," Bennett whispered. "But I wonder if we truly understand what it means." Morrison said nothing. He only knew one thing: when the time came, the weapon would be used. By the 30th day, the ultimatum was nearly expired. Humanity had not replied to the Zephyrians' demand. No message of surrender. No pledge of loyalty. Only silence. And in that silence, the Devastator prepared for its maiden voyage. Its destination, Kepler 442b. The alien outpost. The world where the Zephyrians awaited Earth's answer. The launch was not broadcast to the public. The world below would not see the Devastator rise. Instead, humanity's fate lifted quietly from the asteroid belt, guided by Morrison's hand and the hopes of billions. As the engines flared, Morrison stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the stars. He thought of Earth, of oceans and forests, of children who had no idea that their lives hung on what happened next. He thought of history, of Thermopylae, of Trafalgar, of Stalingrad. Moments where the few had stood against the many. Moments where courage mattered more than numbers. And then he thought of the ultimatum. The arrogance of a voice that assumed humanity would kneel. Not today. Set course, Morrison ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart thundered with the weight of destiny. Take us to Kepler 442. And with that, the Devastator leapt into the void, humanity's first step into an interstellar war. And so the Devastator left Earth behind, carrying not just weapons, but the burden of every soul on the planet. In the silence of space, humanity's choice had been made clear: they would not surrender. But what awaited them at Kepler 442? Would the Devastators might be enough against an empire that had crushed 17 worlds before? The next chapter will reveal the answer, as humanity finally faces the Zephyrian fleet in battle. The journey to Kepler 442b took only a matter of days. To the crew of the Devastator, time passed in a blur of drills, final system checks, and the unspoken weight of what lay ahead. For many, it would be their first voyage beyond the familiar skies of the solar system. For all of them, it might be their last. Admiral Morrison stood at the command deck as the alien world filled the main display. Kepler 442b hung in the darkness like a sapphire gem, its oceans glimmering beneath a swirl of clouds. But it was not beauty that drew the crew's eyes. It was the fleet. Hundreds of alien warships encircled the planet, their hulls glowing with bioluminescent veins of energy, each one alive in a way human vessels were not. A wall of steel and light, an empire's response to a defiance they had not expected. The Zephyrians had not come to negotiate. They had come to make an example. The Devastator slowed at the edge of the system, weapons powered but silent. For a brief moment, a message came through. The same voice from before, calm, detached, certain of its superiority. Earth. You were given a choice. Kneel, or be erased. This is your last chance. On the bridge, the crew waited for Morrison's response. He did not hesitate. Transmit nothing. The silence stretched for long minutes. Then the alien fleet began to move. The first interstellar war of humankind had begun. The Zephyrian ships attacked in waves, formations honed over centuries of conquest. Energy beams lanced across the void, filling the darkness with streaks of blinding light. The Devastator's shields flared, bending reality itself to deflect the assault. The ship shook, but it held. And then, for the first time, humanity struck back. Rail cannons thundered. Slugs of tungsten, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, tore through the void. Entire Zephyrian vessels shattered under the sheer force, their glowing hulls collapsing in silence. Plasma batteries followed, unleashing storms of fire that engulfed the enemy lines. The crew of the Devastator erupted in cheers, but Morrison remained still, eyes fixed on the display. This was only the beginning. The aliens adapted quickly, weaving through the battlefield with inhuman precision. Their weapons sliced into the Devastator's flanks, burning scars across the armor. Drones swarmed, each one a needle of light stabbing at the Titan. Core integrity at 80%, Dr. Bennett reported, his voice tight. Shields holding, for now. Morrison gave the order. Activate the displacement cannon. The ship's superweapon had been tested only once. Even then, no one fully understood it. The displacement cannon did not fire a projectile. It did not burn or tear. It simply erased. Reality bent as the weapon charged, the stars around it twisting like water down a drain. Then a beam of impossible light lanced across the battlefield. 5 Zephyrian ships vanished in an instant, their glowing hulls snuffed out as though they had never existed. For a moment, the battlefield froze. Even the aliens seemed to hesitate. Then the swarm redoubled its fury. "Admiral," Bennett said quietly, his eyes locked on the display, "if we keep using that weapon, we may be tearing at the fabric of space itself. We don't know what's on the other side of that tear." Morrison's reply was cold. "What matters is what's on this side. Fire again." And so humanity's most terrible weapon carved through the Zephyrian fleet. Hours passed. The Devastator endured wounds that would have destroyed any smaller ship. Entire sections of the hull were scorched black. Hundreds of crew members lay dead or dying. Yet the Titan refused to fall. When the last Zephyrian ship detonated in silence, a strange stillness filled the bridge. The impossible had happened, humanity had won its first battle among the stars. The cheer that followed was ragged, desperate, and filled with disbelief. Humanity, fragile, untested, young, had stood against an empire and lived. But Morrison did not smile. He had seen the scans. Out of hundreds of Zephyrian ships, this had been only a fraction of their true fleet. And yet, it was not that which troubled him most. It was the anomaly. Every time the displacement cannon fired, sensors recorded something beyond the tear. Faint signals. Whispers of energy that did not belong to the Zephyrians, something older, vaster, waiting in the dark. Bennett's words returned to him, "We don't know what's on the other side." The following days were filled with repair work. Shuttles carried the wounded to makeshift medical bays. Engineers crawled through shattered corridors, patching holes and restoring systems. Humanity had won, but it had paid in blood. And then the Harari appeared. A ship unlike the Zephyrians, small, crystalline, and unarmed, emerged from the void. The Harari were a neutral species, watchers rather than conquerors. They had never interfered in wars before. But now, they broke their silence. Their envoy spoke through a holographic projection, its form shifting between shapes too fluid to follow. "You are different," the Harari said. 17 civilizations faced the Zephyrians. 17 fell. But you opened a door. Morrison frowned. "What door?" The Harari's form flickered, their voice heavy with something that sounded like fear. "The weapon you used. The tear it created. The Zephyrians were never your greatest enemy. They, too, were only survivors, survivors of what sleeps beyond. The architects." The bridge fell silent. The Harari continued, "You think you have won. But all you have done is call attention to yourselves. And now, they will come." When the Harari departed, leaving only silence in their wake, Morrison gathered his officers. The victory at Kepler 442b had proved one thing: humanity could fight. But the galaxy was larger, darker, and more dangerous than anyone on Earth had ever imagined. The Devastator's crew looked to their admiral for answers. But Morrison had none to give. All he could offer was the same conviction that had carried them this far: humanity would not kneel. Not to the Zephyrians. Not to the architects. Not to anyone. The galaxy now knew Earth existed. The empire they had defied would return in greater numbers. And somewhere in the abyss, something far older was stirring. Yet in that uncertainty, a strange clarity emerged. For the first time in 500,000 years, the galaxy had witnessed something no alien empire had ever seen before. Humanity fighting back. And somewhere, deep in the void, the architects had noticed. And so the first war of humanity among the stars ended not with peace, but with a revelation: the Zephyrians were not the ultimate enemy. They were merely a shadow of something greater. The architects, a civilization so vast and ancient that even empires feared to speak their name. The question now was not whether humanity could survive the Zephyrians. It was whether humanity was ready to face what was coming next.